My parents forced me to sit in the rain at my sister's wedding while the other guests sat in a climate-controlled tent. My sister poured vintage red wine on my white dress and called me dirt in front of Atlanta's elite. I stood there shivering and humiliated while my family laughed. But they did not know that my husband, the man they called a broke mechanic, had just arrived, and he did not come to eat cake. He came to fire the groom. Before I tell you how my husband destroyed their entire world in 5 minutes, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the black sheep who was actually the only one telling the truth. My name is Zora, and I am 35 years old. I work with my hands restoring antique furniture and bringing forgotten treasures back to life. My family calls me a scavenger. They tell everyone I play in the dirt for a living. To my parents, Vernon and Patricia appearance is the only currency that matters. They have spent the last 10 years scrubbing the grit of our past off their skin, desperate to blend into the upper echelons of Atlanta's black elite. They want the country clubs, the galas, and the respectability. They do not want a daughter who reminds them of where we came from. That is why I was standing outside the wrought iron gates of the Oakwood estate, watching a beat-up Toyota Camry drive away. I had taken an Uber because my mother explicitly told me not to park my 10-year-old sedan in the valet lot. She said it would lower the property value of the wedding photos. The estate was breathtaking. It was a sprawling plantation-style mansion with weeping willows and a manicured lawn that looked like it had been cut with nail scissors. This was where my younger sister Chantel was marrying Brad. Brad was a white corporate sales director with a teeth-whitening obsession and an ego the size of the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. He came from old money, or at least that is what he told everyone. My parents treated him like he was the second coming. I checked my watch. I was exactly on time. I took a deep breath and smoothed down my dress. It was a cream-colored tea-length dress with intricate lace detailing on the collar. To the untrained eye, it might look simple. But I knew the truth. It was a 1955 vintage Chanel I had found at an estate sale in Savannah and spent 3 months restoring by hand. The silk lining was impeccable. The stitching was history. I felt beautiful in it. I felt worthy. That feeling lasted exactly 30 seconds. Zora. The voice cut through the humid air like a serrated knife. My mother, Patricia, marched down the stone steps of the estate. She was wearing a floor-length gown that shimmered with too many sequins for a daytime wedding. Her hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful. She did not hug me. She did not smile. She looked at me the way one looks at a stain on a new carpet. "You are 2 minutes late," she hissed, grabbing my arm and pulling me to the side away from the view of the arriving guests. "And what in God's name are you wearing?" I pulled my arm away. "Hello to you too, Mom. It is vintage Chanel. I restored it myself." Patricia let out a short, cruel laugh. "It looks like something you pulled out of a dead woman's closet. Look at the hem. It is dated. Zora, I told you to buy something new. I told you to look like you belong here. You look like you are about to serve tea to the real guests. Brad's family is here. His business partners are here. Do you have any idea how important this merger is for him? Do not embarrass us today." I felt the familiar heat rising in my cheeks. It was not embarrassment. It was rage. I swallowed it down. I was here for Chantel. Despite everything, she was my little sister. I remembered braiding her hair when we were kids. I remembered walking her to school when Mom and Dad were working double shifts. I wanted to see her happy. "I am not here to embarrass anyone," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I am here to watch my sister get married." "Where is Dante?" My husband. Dante was supposed to meet me here. He had been running errands all morning, secretive errands that he would not explain. Your husband, Patricia, sneered the word dripping with disdain. I told the security guard to direct him to the service entrance around the back. We cannot have that rusty truck of his parked out front next to the Bentleys and Porsches. God forbid Brad's boss sees it. My husband drives a 1956 Ford F-100. It is a classic. He restored it from the frame up. It is worth more than your BMW, Mom. Patricia waved her hand dismissively. It is a truck, Zora. It belongs on a farm, not at a wedding. Now come on, your father has your seating assignment, and try to stand in the back. You smell like turpentine and desperation. She turned and walked up the stairs, her sequins catching the sunlight. I followed her, my head held high. I was used to this. I had spent 15 years being the disappointment, the daughter who didn't go to law school, the daughter who dropped out of college to work 2 jobs so the family wouldn't lose the house. They never talked about that part. They only talked about how I didn't have a degree. At the top of the stairs, my father Vernon was holding a clipboard like he was guarding the nuclear codes. He was wearing a tuxedo that was slightly too tight around the middle. He was sweating, his eyes darting around nervously as he greeted the guests. Hello, Senator. So glad you could make it. Yes, right this way. VIP section under the main tent. He spotted me and his smile vanished instantly. He looked at his clipboard, then at me, then back at the clipboard. He did not make eye contact. Zora, he grunted. Hi, Dad. Where are we sitting? Vernon ran a finger down the list. I saw the names typed in elegant calligraphy. The senator, the CEO, the investors, Brad's family. Then I saw my name. It was not typed. It was written in blue ink on a sticky note attached to the bottom of the page. Table 45, he said, ripping the sticky note off and handing it to me. I looked at the map of the venue. Tables 1 through 20 were under the massive air-conditioned white tent with the crystal chandeliers. Tables 20 through 40 were on the patio under the shade of the ancient oaks. Table 45 was nowhere near them. Where is table 45? I asked. Vernon pointed a manicured finger toward the far edge of the garden, past the rose bushes, past the portable luxury restrooms, near a cluster of hedges that concealed the catering kitchen's dumpster. Over there, he said. It is the garden view. Dad, I said, my voice dropping an octave. That is outside the tent. The forecast says rain. It is 90% humidity, and it is next to the trash. It is not next to the trash. Vernon lied, finally looking me in the eye. It is adjacent to the service area. It is convenient. Look, Zora, we had to make cuts. Brad invited the entire board of directors. We had to prioritize. You and Dante, you do not fit the demographic of the main tent. The demographic? I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You mean we are not rich enough to sit in the shade, Dad? I am your daughter. I am the bride's sister. You are putting me next to the dumpster while you seat Brad's college roommate's golf buddy in the VIP section. Vernon's face hardened. Lower your voice. This is exactly why you are at table 45. You cannot control yourself. You have no decorum. Brad's family comes from old money, Zora. They judge. We are trying to show them that the Williams family has class. We are trying to show them we belong. Having you in there looking like this, asking questions, talking about your little furniture repair gigs, it ruins the illusion. The illusion. That was the word. My entire life had been sacrificed to maintain their illusion. You mean the illusion that we have always been wealthy? I asked, leaning in close so only he could hear. Does Brad know that this family has class because I worked double shifts at the diner to pay off your gambling debts 10 years ago? Does Brad know the Williams family has class because I gave you my tuition money so Chantel could have braces and go to private school? Vernon flinched. He looked around wildly to see if anyone had heard. Shut up, he hissed. That is ancient history. We are past that. We are new people now. No, Dad, I said. You are the same people. You are just wearing rented tuxedos. Vernon grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. You listen to me, ungrateful girl. You are lucky we invited you at all. Patricia wanted to leave you off the list entirely. She said you would be a stain on the day. I fought for you. I said let her come, let her have a plate of food. So you take table 45 and you say thank you. Or you can turn around, get back in your Uber, and go back to your dusty little workshop. I looked at my father. I looked at the sweat beading on his forehead, the fear in his eyes. He was terrified. He was terrified that the world would find out he was a fraud, and he hated me because I was the living, breathing evidence of who he really was. I pulled my arm free. I will sit at table 45, I said. But not for you, and not for Brad. I am sitting there because I want to see how this plays out. I want to see if your illusion holds up when the storm comes. Vernon smoothed his jacket, composing himself. Good. And tell Dante to keep his mouth shut. We do not need him talking about engines with the vice president of marketing. I walked away from him. I walked past the greeters offering champagne. I walked past the string quartet playing Mozart. I walked past the rows of white Chiavari chairs with silk ribbons. I walked all the way to the edge of the property. Table 45 was exactly what I expected. It was a round plastic folding table, the kind you buy at a hardware store. It had a thin tablecloth that was too small for it. There were no flowers. There were no place cards. It was sitting on a patch of uneven dirt dangerously close to the hum of the generator and the smell of reheating fish from the catering tent. There were 2 chairs, one for me, one for Dante. I sat down. The plastic chair wobbled on the uneven ground. I looked up at the sky. Dark, bruised clouds were gathering in the west, moving fast over the Georgia pines. The air was thick and heavy, smelling of ozone and impending rain. Inside the main tent, I could hear laughter. I could hear the clinking of glasses. I saw my mother fawning over a woman with a massive hat, probably Brad's mother. I saw Chantel posing for photos, her smile wide and practiced. A drop of rain hit my cheek, then another. I opened my small purse and took out my phone. I texted Dante. Where are you? I am at table 45. Bring the umbrella and bring the folder. He replied instantly. Almost there. Traffic is blocked by the valet line. Why do I need the folder? I looked at the clouds. I looked at my parents, laughing in the distance, safe and dry. Because I typed back, it is going to rain, and I think we are going to need some leverage. The rain started slowly, at first large heavy drops that spotted the cheap tablecloth. I sat there, my hands folded in my lap, refusing to move. I was not going to run for cover like a frightened animal. I was going to sit here and let them see me, let them see exactly what they were doing to their own flesh and blood. A waiter rushed past me, carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres toward the tent. He looked at me, then at the sky, then back at me. He looked confused. Ma'am, he said, pausing. You know you can... Well, you are not supposed to be out here. The reception is in the tent. I smiled at him. No, it is not. My father. The gentleman in the ill-fitting tuxedo gave me this assignment personally. Table 45. This is my seat. The waiter looked uncomfortable. But it is starting to pour. I know, I said. Do you have a napkin? He handed me a cocktail napkin. I dabbed the water off my forehead. Go serve the VIPs, I said. Do not worry about me. I am just the scenery. He hurried away. The rain intensified. My hair, which I had spent an hour styling into soft curls, began to frizz and flatten. My vintage Chanel dress, the silk I had painstakingly restored, began to absorb the water. It was getting heavy, cold. I sat there. I stared at the tent. And I waited for my husband. They thought they had put me in my place. They thought they had hidden the family shame by the dumpster. But they forgot one thing. When you put someone in the dirt, you give them a solid foundation to stand on. And when Dante arrived, we were not just going to stand. We were going to tear the whole tent down. The rain began to fall harder, transforming from a gentle mist into a steady rhythmic drumming against the plastic surface of table 45. The water pooled in the center of the cheap tablecloth, creating a small, sad lake that threatened to spill over onto my lap. I watched the guests inside the main tent. They were dry. They were comfortable. They were sipping champagne under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, completely oblivious to the storm gathering outside. I was the only one seated in the open air, the only one designated to weather the elements like a piece of lawn furniture that someone had forgotten to bring inside. I reached into my purse and pulled out my umbrella. It was a simple, compact black umbrella I kept for emergencies. It was not elegant. It was not a fashion statement. It was a tool for survival. I pressed the button and it snapped open with a satisfying pop, creating a small black canopy over my head. For a moment, the sound of the rain hitting the nylon fabric was comforting. It was a shield. A small private barrier between me and the humiliation my parents had orchestrated. I adjusted the umbrella, trying to cover my shoulders and protect the delicate silk of my vintage dress. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of wet earth and the faint, sickly sweet odor of the dumpster behind me. I told myself I could do this. I could sit here for an hour, wait for Dante, and then we would leave. I would endure this for Chantel because she was my sister, and because I refused to let them see me break. But I should have known that my comfort was not on the agenda for today. Zora. The shriek pierced through the sound of the rain. I looked up to see Chantel storming across the lawn toward me. She was flanked by 3 bridesmaids in lavender dresses marching in formation like a pastel-colored military unit. Chantel was holding the skirt of her massive ball gown up with one hand, skipping over puddles with surprising agility for someone wearing 6-inch heels. She looked frantic. Her eyes were wide and manic, fixed on the black umbrella hovering over my head. She did not care that it was raining. She did not care that her sister was sitting alone by the trash. She cared about the aesthetic. "Put that down," she screamed as she got closer. "Put it down right now." I stared at her. "Chantel, it is raining. I am trying to stay dry." She reached the edge of my table and stopped, panting slightly. Her hair was sprayed into an immovable helmet of curls impervious to the wind. She pointed a manicured finger at my umbrella. "It is black, Zora. It is black. Do you have any idea what you are doing? You are ruining the feng shui." I looked at the umbrella. Then I looked at her. "Feng shui?" I asked. "We're in a backyard in Georgia, Chantel, and I am sitting next to a dumpster. I think the feng shui sailed a long time ago." She stamped her foot. A literal stamp, like a toddler who had been denied a second cookie. "Brad hates black," she yelled. "He says it is the color of death. It is bad luck for the merger. We curated a palette, Zora, lavender cream and gold, not funeral black. You look like a giant black crow perched in the middle of my garden party. The photographer is trying to take wide shots of the reception area, and all he can see is that hideous black mushroom sticking up in the corner. Take it down." I tightened my grip on the handle. "I will take it down when you give me a seat inside the tent," I said calmly. "Or when you provide me with a lavender umbrella. Until then, I am using this. I am not going to get soaked because Brad has a superstition about colors." Chantel's face turned a shade of red that clashed violently with her lavender theme. She looked at her bridesmaids for support. They sneered at me in unison, a chorus of mean girls who had never grown up. "You are doing this on purpose," Chantel hissed. "You are doing this to spite me. You want to ruin the photos. You want everyone to look at you. You always have to be the center of attention, don't you? Just like when we were kids. Always the victim, always the martyr." "I am the victim. Because you put me at the kids' table in a thunderstorm," I said. "I am not trying to be the center of attention. I am trying to be dry." She lunged at me. It happened so fast I didn't have time to react. She grabbed the metal shaft of the umbrella and yanked it. I held on for a second, but I was sitting down and off balance. She wrenched it from my hand with a strength fueled by pure entitlement. "Give me that," she screamed. She stepped back, holding my umbrella like a trophy. Then, with a look of pure malice, she turned and marched over to the green dumpster sitting 5 feet away. She stepped on the pedal. The lid clanged open, releasing a fresh wave of rotting food smell. She threw my umbrella inside. "There," she said, dusting off her hands as the lid slammed shut. "Now it is where it belongs." I sat there stunned. The rain, which had been a steady drizzle, chose that exact moment to intensify. It began to pour. Cold, heavy sheets of water slammed down on me. Within seconds, my hair was plastered to my skull. The water soaked through the lace collar of my dress, running down my back in icy rivulets. The silk fabric, so carefully restored, began to darken and heavy with water. Chantel smiled. It was a cruel, satisfied smile. "That is much better," she said. "Now you blend in with the background. Just sit still and stop causing problems. If I see you pull out another one, I will have security escort you off the property." She turned and signaled to her bridesmaids. They giggled, covering their mouths as they turned to follow her back to the safety of the main tent. I watched them run through the rain, squealing as they ducked under the white canvas awning. I was alone again, and I was soaked. The water dripped from my eyelashes, blurring my vision. I could feel the chill seeping into my bones. My dress was ruined. Silk does not recover from a soaking like this. The water spots would stain. The fabric would warp. Hours of work destroyed in seconds because my sister did not like the color black. I looked toward the main tent. The walls were made of clear plastic designed to let the guests enjoy the view of the garden without suffering the weather. It acted like a giant window into a world I was forbidden to enter. I could see them. I could see the guests pointing. A group of men in tuxedos were standing near the edge of the tent, holding crystal tumblers of scotch. They were looking right at me. One of them said something and the whole group erupted in laughter. They were laughing at the woman sitting in the rain. They were laughing at the poor relation who had been put in her place. It felt like high school all over again. It felt like every moment of my life where I had been told I was not enough, not rich enough, not pretty enough, not successful enough. And then the crowd parted. Brad emerged from the center of the tent. He was holding a glass of champagne in one hand. He was dry. His tuxedo was impeccable. His teeth were blindingly white. He walked to the edge of the tent, protected by the overhang, and looked out at me. He did not look concerned. He did not look apologetic. He looked amused. He raised his glass in a mock toast. "Hey, Zora," he shouted over the sound of the rain. His voice carried loud and arrogant. I wiped the water from my eyes and looked at him. "You look a little wet there," he called out. The guests around him chuckled. He fed off their energy, his grin widening. "You know," he continued, shouting so everyone could hear. "You remind me of something. You know that stray dog my parents adopted, the one with the mange? That is exactly what you look like right now. A wet, shivering stray dog waiting for scraps." The laughter from the tent grew louder. It was a roar of approval. They loved him. They loved his cruelty because it made them feel superior. Brad took a sip of his champagne, savoring the moment. "Don't worry, Zora," he yelled. "We will save you a bone. Just stay there. Good dog. Stay." He laughed again, a deep belly laugh that shook his shoulders. Then he turned his back on me and walked back into the party, high-fiving one of his groomsmen. I sat there. The rain ran down my face, mixing with the hot tears of rage that I refused to let fall. A wet dog. That is what they saw. That is all they had ever seen. A creature to be pitied, to be kicked, to be left outside. I looked down at my hands. They were clenched into fists on my lap. My knuckles were white. They thought this was the end. They thought I would run away, crying back to my Uber, back to my small life. They thought they had won. But they were wrong. I was not leaving. I was not going anywhere. I was going to sit right here in this rain. I was going to let the water soak me to the bone. I was going to let my dress be ruined. I was going to let my hair go wild. I wanted them to see me. I wanted to be the eyesore they couldn't ignore. I wanted to be the ghost at their feast, because Dante was coming. And when he saw this, when he saw his wife sitting in the mud, shivering and soaked while these people laughed, the storm outside was going to look like a gentle breeze compared to what he was going to unleash. I reached for my phone. It was wet, but it was waterproof. I opened the text thread with Dante. "Hurry," I typed. Then I put the phone away. I straightened my back. I lifted my chin. I stared directly at the tent, at the lights, at the laughter. Let it rain, I thought. Let it pour. It is only going to make the fire burn hotter. The rain became a physical weight pushing me down into the mud. My vintage Chanel dress, the one I had spent months restoring stitch by delicate stitch, was now heavy and clinging to my skin like a cold second layer. I was shivering violently. My teeth chattered a sound I hoped was drowned out by the thunder rolling overhead. I looked at the tent. It glowed like a lantern in the gloom, filled with dry, warm people who were probably complaining about the humidity while I sat in a puddle. I could not do it anymore. Pride was one thing, but hypothermia was another. I grabbed my purse and stood up. My heels sank into the softened earth, making a sucking sound with every step. I marched toward the main tent. I was not going to ask for permission. I was going to stand under a roof. I slipped through a side opening in the heavy canvas drapes, trying to make myself as small as possible. The transition was jarring. 1 second I was in a cold gray wash of water and wind. The next I was enveloped in air-conditioned silence, the smell of expensive perfume, and the soft clinking of silverware. I found a spot near a large potted fern in the back corner, well away from the head table, hoping to blend into the shadows. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to stop the shivering. I dripped water onto the hardwood floor panels they had installed over the grass. I looked down at the small puddle forming around my feet and felt a fresh wave of shame. I was the stain in their perfect picture. But invisibility was not a luxury I was afforded today. I saw her before she saw me. Chantel. She was floating across the room, having changed into her second dress of the evening. This one was a sleek architectural number that probably cost more than my entire workshop. She held a glass of red wine in her hand, swirling it dangerously close to the rim. She was laughing with a group of Brad's corporate friends, her head thrown back, exposing her long, elegant neck. She looked like a queen. Then her eyes locked onto me. The laughter stopped. Her smile didn't fade, but it changed. It sharpened. It became the smile of a cat that has just spotted a mouse with a broken leg. She said something to the group, excused herself, and began walking toward me. She did not walk in a straight line. She weaved through the tables, stopping to touch a shoulder, here accept a compliment there. But her trajectory was clear. She was a heat-seeking missile, and I was the target. I pressed my back against the tent wall. There was nowhere to go. To my left was the catering entrance. To my right was a wall of floral arrangements. Chantel reached me. Up close, she looked manic. The adrenaline of the day mixed with whatever else she was running on made her eyes too bright. "What are you doing inside?" she asked, her voice low and dangerous. "I told you. Table 45. Garden view." "It is a monsoon out there, Chantel," I said, my teeth still chattering. "I am freezing. I just need to dry off for 10 minutes. She looked me up and down. Her gaze lingered on my wet hair, my ruined dress, the mud on my shoes. She took a sip of her wine. It was a dark, heavy red. Cabernet, maybe. Or perhaps something more expensive, something Brad's boss had brought. "You are dripping on the floor," she said. "Someone is going to slip." "You are a liability, Zora. You have always been a liability." "I am your sister," I whispered. "No," she said. "You are a reminder of everything we left behind. And I am sick of looking at you." She took a step closer. The glass of wine was now level with my chest. "You should go back outside," she said. "The rain will wash the dirt off." "I am not going back out there." Chantel smiled. It was a small, tight movement of her lips. "Fine," she said. "If you want to be inside, make yourself useful. Catch." It happened in slow motion. She did not trip. There was no uneven floorboard. There was no obstacle. She looked me dead in the eye, tilted her wrist, and threw the contents of her glass at me. The liquid hit me with shocking force. It splashed across the front of my cream-colored dress, blooming instantly like a dark, violent flower. It soaked into the lace collar. It ran down my chest. It splattered onto my neck and chin. The smell of alcohol and tannins filled my nose. The cold wine mixed with the rainwater already soaking my skin. I gasped, looking down at the ruin of my work. The Chanel was destroyed. The silk fibers would never release this stain. It was not just a dress. It was art. And she had treated it like a rag. Then the performance began. Chantel let out a shriek that silenced the entire tent. She dropped the empty glass. It shattered on the floor, shards of crystal exploding around our feet. She stumbled backward, clutching her chest, her face twisting into a mask of shock and victimhood. "Oh my God," she screamed. "Zora, why would you do that?" The room froze. The string quartet stopped playing. Every head turned. Brad was there in seconds, rushing from the bar. My mother was right behind him. I stood there, red wine dripping from my chin, my hands hovering in the air, too stunned to speak. "She tripped me," Chantel wailed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She stuck her foot out. I was just coming over to bring her a towel because I felt bad for her, and she tripped me. Look at my dress." Her dress was spotless. Not a drop had landed on her. But the narrative was set. "You monster!" Brad growled, stepping between me and Chantel. He looked at me with pure disgust. "You cannot stand it, can you? You cannot stand to see her happy for one single day." "I did not trip her," I said, my voice shaking. "She threw it on me. Look at me. I am the one covered in wine." "Of course you are," Chantel sobbed, burying her face in Brad's shoulder. "You tried to grab the glass from me. You said I didn't deserve to drink expensive wine because I never worked a day in my life. You said I was a gold digger. I never said that." I protested, looking around the room for a witness, for anyone who had seen the truth. But all I saw were walls of judgment, faces recoiling in horror, whispers behind hands. "You are jealous," Chantel screamed, pulling away from Brad to get in my face. "You are sick with jealousy. You are jealous because I married a director and you married a grease monkey. You are jealous because I am having a wedding at a plantation and you got married at the courthouse. You are jealous because I am winning Zora and you are just a loser with a broke husband and a fake job." The words hung in the air, toxic and heavy. Grease monkey. Broke husband. She wasn't just insulting me, she was insulting Dante. Dante, who had helped her move into her first apartment. Dante, who had fixed her car for free 3 times when she couldn't afford a mechanic. Dante, who was currently parking a truck worth more than her entire education because he was too humble to flash his wealth. My hands curled into fists. The wine felt sticky on my skin. "You know nothing about my husband," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "And you know nothing about winning. Because if this is winning, Chantel, if destroying your own sister to feel big is winning, then I would rather lose every day for the rest of my life." "Get her out of here," Brad shouted to security. "I want her gone." "She is drunk. She is a danger to the guests." "I am not drunk," I said. "I haven't had a drop of water, let alone wine." Before security could move, my mother was there. Patricia pushed through the crowd, her face a mask of fury. She did not look at Chantel. She did not check to see if the bride was okay. She came straight for me. She grabbed my wrist, her nails digging into my pulse point. She dragged me away from the center of the room toward the service doors. "Mom, she threw it on me," I tried to explain. "Shut up," Patricia hissed. "Just shut your mouth. Do you have any idea who is watching? The vice president of sales is standing right there. The mayor's wife is looking at you." She threw wine on my vintage Chanel, Mom. "I do not care about your old rags," Patricia snapped. She pulled me into the narrow hallway that led to the kitchen and the restrooms. She shoved me toward a door marked "Staff Only." "Look at you," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "You are a mess. You are wet. You are stained. You smell like a winery floor. You are disgusting." She reached into her clutch, but she did not pull out a tissue. She pulled out a compact mirror and checked her own lipstick. She did not offer me anything to clean myself up. She did not offer me a towel. She did not offer me comfort. "Go in there," she said, pointing at the staff bathroom. "Clean yourself up, scrub that stain off your face, and stay in there until I tell you to come out. Do not come back into the tent. Do not let Brad's VIPs see you looking like this. You are ruining the aesthetic. You are ruining the brand. The brand. We were not a family. We were a brand. And I was the defect. Mom, I said, tears finally mixing with the wine on my face. I am your daughter. I am hurt. Why do you always believe her? Why am I always the villain in your story? Patricia snapped the compact shut. Because she is the one with the future, Zora. She is the one marrying up. She is the one who is going to elevate this family. You settled. You married a man with dirt under his fingernails. You chose to be common. So do not expect to be treated like royalty when you act like a peasant. Now get in the bathroom. And if I hear one more word from you, I will have the police remove you for trespassing. She turned her back on me and walked back toward the party, smoothing her sequins, a smile plastering itself onto her face before she even crossed the threshold. I stood alone in the hallway. The smell of industrial cleaner and grease from the kitchen was overwhelming. I looked at the door marked staff only. I pushed it open. It was a small, sterile room with a single sink and a harsh fluorescent light. I looked in the mirror. I looked like a nightmare. My hair was wild. My mascara was running. The red wine stain covered the entire front of my dress, looking like a gruesome wound. I looked defeated. I looked exactly like what they said I was. A mess. A failure. Dirt. I turned on the faucet. The water was cold. I grabbed a rough brown paper towel and started to scrub at the stain on my dress. It was useless. The wine had set. The fabric was ruining under the friction. I stopped scrubbing. I looked at myself in the mirror again. They wanted me to hide. They wanted me to stay in this box until they decided I was presentable enough to be seen. They wanted me to be ashamed. But as I looked at my reflection, something shifted. The anger that had been simmering in my gut began to boil. It burned away the shame. It burned away the sadness. They called Dante a grease monkey. They called him poor. They thought they were better than us because they had rented a tent and bought some title. I reached for my phone. It was sticky with wine residue. I dialed Dante's number. He answered on the first ring. I am walking up to the entrance now, he said. Security tried to stop me, but I think they realized I wasn't in the mood to negotiate. Where are you? I am in the staff bathroom, I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. Why are you okay? No, I said. Chantel threw wine on me. Mom told me to hide so I don't offend the VIPs. And Brad called you a broke mechanic in front of everyone. There was a silence on the other end of the line. A heavy, loaded silence. Then I heard the sound of a car door slamming. Hard. Stay there, Dante said. I am coming to get you. And Zora? Yes, don't clean the stain. Why? Because he said, his voice dropping to a growl I had never heard before. I want them to see exactly what they did. I want that stain to be the last thing Brad sees before I take everything he thinks he owns. He hung up. I put the phone down. I looked at the brown paper towel in my hand. I dropped it in the trash. I did not fix my hair. I did not fix my makeup. I stood there covered in wine and rain, and I waited for my husband. They wanted a show. They wanted to talk about class and money and power. Fine, we would give them a masterclass. And when we were done, the only thing left of their precious reputation would be the stain on the floor where they stood. The sound of Mozart being strangled by a V8 engine was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. I stood in the doorway of the staff bathroom, cracking the door just enough to see the front driveway. The string quartet had been sawing away at a delicate concerto, providing the perfect elevator music for my sister's pretension. But then a low guttural rumble began to vibrate through the floorboards of the Oakwood estate. It wasn't the polite purr of the rented Bentleys or the leased Porsches that lined the circular drive. It was a roar. It was the sound of raw, unadulterated American horsepower. He was here. The white Lexus SUV belonging to the senator was blocking the main archway, but that did not stop the arrival of the beast. Around the corner came my husband's pride and joy. It was a 1956 Ford F-100. To the uneducated eye specifically, the eyes of everyone at this wedding, it looked like a piece of junk that had crawled out of a swamp. The paint was not glossy. It was a matte weathered teal that showed decades of patina and what looked like surface rust. But I knew the truth. I knew that under that hood sat a Coyote engine swap worth more than Brad's annual salary. I knew the chassis was custom fabricated. I knew the suspension was air ride capable of laying the frame on the ground or lifting it for the highway. It was a six-figure build disguised as a farm truck. It was stealth wealth in its purest form, and it was currently vibrating the champagne flutes in the hands of the guests. The music stopped. The quartet faltered, the cellist looking alarmed as the truck idled with a rhythmic, aggressive chop that drowned out the polite chatter. Brad's head snapped toward the driveway. He was standing on the steps of the mansion holding court with his groomsmen looking like a penguin who had just realized the ice was cracking. "What is that?" I heard him shout. "Who let a delivery truck in the front gate?" The truck rolled forward slow and menacing. It did not stop at the valet stand. The valet, a college kid in a red vest, looked terrified. He waved his hands trying to direct the massive vehicle toward the service road that led to the kitchen. "Sir," the valet shouted over the engine, "deliveries are in the back. You cannot be here." The truck ignored him. It rolled right up to the front steps directly behind the senator's Lexus. The air suspension hissed a sharp mechanical sound like a dragon exhaling, and the truck lowered itself until the running boards were inches from the gravel. The engine cut. The silence that followed was deafening. Security, led by a man Brad had hired specifically to keep the riffraff out, marched down the steps. "Move this vehicle immediately," the head of security barked, reaching for the door handle. The door creaked open before he could touch it. A heavy, solid metal sound, and out stepped Dante. If the truck was a shock, my husband was a scandal. In a sea of black tie tuxedos and sequined gowns, Dante looked like he had just walked off a construction site. He was wearing a plain charcoal gray t-shirt that hugged his chest and arms. He wore dark denim jeans and heavy leather work boots. He didn't have a watch on. He didn't have a tie. He looked rough. He looked dangerous. But just like the truck, the details were invisible to them. They saw a t-shirt. I saw $300 Italian cashmere that draped perfectly. They saw jeans. I saw Japanese raw denim that cost more than the caterer's fee. They saw a laborer. I saw the man who had quietly acquired the controlling stake in their company 3 days ago. Dante slammed the truck door shut. He didn't look at the security guard. He didn't look at the valet. He looked up at the steps, scanning the crowd. He looked calm. It was the calm of a man who owns the building, not the man renting a room. Brad laughed. It was a loud braying sound, designed to rally his troops. He walked down 2 steps, flanked by his best man and the vice president of sales. They held their scotch glasses like weapons. "Well, look who it is," Brad announced, his voice dripping with mock hospitality. "The help has arrived." The groomsmen snickered. The guests on the veranda leaned over the railings, whispering. This was the entertainment. This was the show. "Hey, Dante," Brad called out. "Did you get lost on the way to the landfill? Or are you here to fix the toilet? I think the ladies' room is backed up." Dante didn't flinch. He adjusted his shirt, his expression unreadable. He walked around the front of the truck, his boots crunching on the expensive white gravel. "I am not here to fix anything," Brad Dante said. His voice was low, smooth, and carried without him having to shout. "Because some things are broken beyond repair." Brad smirked, swirling his scotch. He walked all the way down to the gravel, standing toe-to-toe with Dante. The height difference was negligible, but the presence difference was massive. Brad looked like he was posing for a magazine. Dante looked like he was ready to end a war. Brad reached out and tapped his knuckles against the hood of the Ford. It was a disrespectful, dismissive gesture, like petting a dog you intend to kick. "Cute truck," Brad said. Does it come with a tetanus shot? Or did you find it in a ditch and decide to drive it until the wheels fall off? You know we ordered ice for the bar. I assume that is what you are hauling in the back, because you certainly aren't hauling any class. The vice president of sales chimed in laughing. Careful, Brad. You might get grease on your tux. These people do not know how to wash their hands. I watched from the bathroom door, my heart hammering against my ribs. They were poking a sleeping bear. They had no idea. They saw a man in a t-shirt and assumed he was beneath them. They didn't know that Dante had grown up in the Ninth Ward of New Orleans, that he had built a logistics empire from a single van, and then pivoted to private equity with a ruthlessness that made Wall Street sharks look like goldfish. They saw poverty. They didn't see the predator. Dante looked at Brad's hand resting on his truck. He looked at it for a long second. Then he looked up at Brad's face. "Take your hand off my property," Dante said. It wasn't a request. Brad froze. The smile didn't leave his face, but it became rigid. He was used to people backing down. He was used to people being intimidated by his title and his suit. He didn't know what to do with a man who simply did not care, or what Brad challenged, though he pulled his hand back an inch. "You going to hit me? You going to assault the groom at his own wedding? Go ahead. I have security right here. We will have you in a cell before the cake is cut." Dante smiled. It was a slow, terrifying smile that did not reach his eyes. "I do not need to hit you, Brad. I do not need to touch you at all. Physical violence is for people who cannot afford lawyers. And trust me, I can afford an army of them." Brad laughed again, looking back at his friends for reassurance. "Afford you, buddy? You cannot even afford a car wash. You are driving a rust bucket and wearing an undershirt. You are embarrassing Zora. She is already hiding in the bathroom because she looks like a wet rat, and now you show up looking like the exterminator. You two are a match made in heaven. The trash couple of the year." The mention of my name made Dante's jaw tighten. The air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Where is she?" Dante asked. "Oh, she is around." Brad waved a hand vaguely toward the service entrance. "We had to put her in timeout. She ruined the aesthetic, just like you are doing right now. So why don't you be a good little mechanic, get back in your heap and drive around to the loading dock? If you are lucky, we might send you out a plate of leftovers." Dante took a step forward. The security guard tensed, putting a hand on his belt. But Dante didn't lunge. He simply invaded Brad's personal space. He stood so close that Brad had to tilt his head back to maintain eye contact. "I am not here for your leftovers," Dante said softly. "I am here for my wife, and I am here to watch the circus." "Circus?" Brad sputtered, trying to regain his footing. "What circus?" "This one," Dante said, gesturing to the mansion. "The tent, the guests, the facade. You are the clown, Brad. Chantel is the ringmaster, and this whole thing is a performance, but the show is over. You just do not know it yet." He turned his back on Brad. He turned his back on the security guard. He turned his back on the entire assembly of Atlanta's social climbers. He walked toward the service entrance where I was hiding. Brad shouted after him, "Walk away. That is right. Run away before I have you towed. You are nothing. You hear me? You are dirt." Dante stopped. He paused with his hand on the door handle of the service entrance. He didn't turn around. He just shook his head slightly as if disappointed in the quality of the opposition. "Enjoy the champagne," Brad Dante called out over his shoulder. "It is the last expensive thing you are going to taste for a very long time." He pushed the door open and stepped into the hallway. I was waiting for him. I was shivering, stained red and dripping wet. I felt small. I felt broken. But then Dante saw me. His eyes softened instantly. The cold, hard mask he had worn outside melted away, replaced by a look of such intense pain and love that I almost started crying again. "Zora," he breathed. He crossed the distance between us in 2 strides. He didn't care about the wine. He didn't care about the mud. He pulled me into his arms, crushing me against his chest. His cashmere shirt absorbed the cold water from my dress. His warmth seeped into my freezing skin. "I am sorry," I whispered into his neck. "I am so sorry." I tried to stay dry. I tried. "Shh," he said, stroking my wet hair. "Do not apologize. Not to me. Never to me." He pulled back and looked at my face. He traced the line of red wine that stained my cheek. His thumb brushed it away gently. "They did this?" he asked. His voice was quiet, but it vibrated with a dark energy. "Chantel," I said. "She threw it. And Mom? Mom told me to hide." Dante nodded. It was a small, sharp nod. He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the wine and the insult. "Okay," he said. "Okay." He reached into his back pocket. He pulled out a white envelope. It was thick. It was heavy. He held it in his hand for a moment, weighing it. "Is that it?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "The acquisition papers. And the HR files." He looked at me. "Do you want to leave?" he asked. "We can go right now. I will take you home. I will run you a bath. We can forget these people exist." I looked at the envelope in his hand. I looked at the stain on my dress. I thought about Brad calling me a dog. I thought about Chantel throwing my umbrella in the trash. I thought about 15 years of being the family secret. "No," I said. Dante smiled. It was the smile of a wolf who has just found the gate to the sheep pen unlocked. "Good," he said. He took off his boots. He took off his socks. He handed them to me. "Put these on," he said. "Your feet are freezing." "But you will be barefoot," I said. Dante shrugged. He looked down at his bare feet on the linoleum floor. "I grew up barefoot, Zora. It helps me feel the ground before I shake it." He took my hand. "Let's go get something to eat," he said. "I hear the lobster is terrible." We walked out of the staff hallway. My husband, the billionaire, barefoot in a t-shirt. Me, the artist covered in wine and wearing men's work socks. We walked past the kitchen staff who stared in open-mouthed silence. We walked past the security guard who stepped aside, unsure of what to do with two people who clearly had nothing left to lose. We walked right into the main tent. The chatter didn't stop this time. It turned into a gasp. A collective intake of breath from 200 people as they saw the bride's sister and her husband looking like shipwreck survivors crashing a coronation. Brad was at the head table laughing. He saw us. His fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Dante didn't look at him. He led me to table 45. He pulled out the wet plastic chair. He sat me down. He sat down next to me. He put the white envelope on the table. It sat there stark and bright against the wet tablecloth. A bomb waiting to detonate. A waiter approached, looking terrified. Can I get you anything?" he stammered. Dante looked at the waiter. "Yes," Dante said. "Bring us the check for the whole wedding." The waiter blinked. "Sir." "You heard me," Dante said, his voice carrying to the nearby tables. "Bring me the bill for this entire event. The flowers, the food, the venue, the band. Bring it all to me." "But the bride's father is paying," the waiter said. "Not anymore," Dante said. "I am buying this party, and since I am paying for it, I think I would like to make a toast." He stood up. He picked up a spoon and tapped it against the side of a water glass he found on a nearby abandoned tray. The sound rang out sharp and clear. Ding, ding, ding. All eyes turned to table 45, to the table by the trash, to the man in the t-shirt. It was time. The door to the staff hallway clicked shut behind us, sealing off the sterile white light of the bathroom and thrusting us back into the humidity of the Georgia evening. My hand was small inside Dante's. His palm was rough, calloused from years of working on engines simply because he loved the mechanics of things, not because he had to. To the people in that tent, those calluses were signs of poverty. To me, They were the only real thing in this entire zip code. We walked toward the main tent. The rain had slowed to a miserable spitting drizzle that coated everything in a fine mist. I could feel the eyes of the kitchen staff boring into our backs. They were whispering. I did not blame them. We looked like a disaster. My dress was a map of red wine stains and rainwater. Dante was barefoot, carrying his heavy work boots in one hand, walking with the silent, predatory grace of a man who owned the pavement he stepped on. I felt a tug on my hand. Dante stopped. He looked at the glowing entrance of the tent, then down at me. His jaw was set so hard a muscle twitched in his cheek. "Zora," he said, his voice low. "We do not have to go back in there. We can get in the truck. We can go to Waffle House. We can go home. I can have my lawyers burn this place to the ground remotely. You do not have to sit there and let them pick at you." I looked at him. I saw the protective rage burning in his eyes. He wanted to shield me. He wanted to take me away from the pain. It was what he had always done. When my car broke down and I could not afford parts, he fixed it overnight and told me it was an easy job. When my landlord tried to evict me, Dante bought the building and lowered the rent without telling me for 6 months. He was a fixer. But this could not be fixed by leaving. If we left now, we were the trash they said we were. If we left now, Brad would tell the story for the next 20 years about how he ran the grease monkey off the property. If we left now, my mother would sigh and tell her friends I just couldn't handle the pressure of high society. "No," I said. I squeezed his hand. "If we leave, they win. They want us to disappear. They want us to be the shame they sweep under the rug. I want to stay. I want to eat their food. I want to drink their champagne. I want to look Brad in the eye when you hand him that envelope." Dante studied my face. He saw the steel that had formed under the humiliation. He nodded. A slow, dark smile spread across his face. "All right," he said. "We stay. But we do it my way. No more hiding." We walked into the tent. The transition was immediate. The hum of conversation died down, replaced by a wave of silence that rippled outward from the entrance. It was the kind of silence that screams. 200 heads turned, 400 eyes judged. We did not shrink. We did not hunch our shoulders. Dante walked with his chest out, unbothered by his lack of shoes. I walked with my chin up, wearing my wine stain like a medal of honor. We walked past the table where my cousins were sitting. They looked down at their plates, terrified to make eye contact. We walked past the table where Brad's sales team sat. They openly snickered, nudging each other and pointing at Dante's feet. We reached table 45. It was still wet. The plastic chairs were still slick with rain that had blown in under the edge of the tent. It was still next to the garbage cans. Dante pulled out my chair. He took the napkin from the place setting, wiped the seat dry with a few efficient swipes, and tossed the wet napkin onto the grass. He waited for me to sit. Then he sat down next to me, placing his boots on the ground with a heavy thud. The silence broke. The chatter resumed, louder and more frantic than before. They were talking about us. They were scandalized. It was delicious. A waiter approached. He was young, barely 20, with a sheen of sweat on his upper lip. He looked terrified. He held a bottle of wine, but he did not pour it. He just stood there, clutching the neck of the bottle like a lifeline. "Sir, ma'am," he stammered. Is there—" "We are fine," Dante said, leaning back in his plastic chair and crossing his arms. "We are just waiting for dinner. I hear the menu is exceptional." The waiter swallowed hard and scurried away. 10 minutes later, the service began. It was a choreographed ballet of wealth. Dozens of servers streamed out of the kitchen, balancing massive silver trays high above their heads. The smell was intoxicating. Butter, garlic, seared meat, the ocean. I watched as they served the head table. Brad was laughing, his face flushed with alcohol and triumph. A server placed a massive plate in front of him. It was surf and turf. A whole Maine lobster tail, split and grilled, resting next to a thick slab of Wagyu beef. It was excess on a plate. The servers moved to the VIP tables. My parents received their plates. My mother made a show of inspecting her lobster, nodding her approval to the server as if she were the queen inspecting the crown jewels. Chantel was picking at her beef, looking bored by the luxury. The servers moved through the tent, dispensing lobsters and steaks to the friends, the distant relatives, the business partners. Everyone was eating. Everyone was feasting. Then the servers stopped. They turned around and marched back to the kitchen. Table 45 was empty. I looked at Dante. He was watching the head table, his expression unreadable. "They are not going to feed us," I whispered. "Just wait," he said. A moment later, the kitchen door swung open again. A single waiter emerged. It was not one of the main servers. It was the busboy. He was carrying 2 white styrofoam boxes, the kind you get at a roadside takeout joint. He wasn't carrying them on a tray. He was holding them in his hands, stacked on top of each other. He walked straight to table 45. He did not make eye contact. He dropped the boxes on the table. They landed with a light, hollow sound. Plap! "What is this?" Dante asked. His voice was conversational, but the busboy flinched as if he had been struck. The busboy looked at his shoes. "Ms. Patricia's instructions, sir," he mumbled. "She said the kitchen ran out of the VIP surf and turf plates. She said there was a miscount on the RSVP list." Dante looked at the head table. There were 3 extra plates of lobster sitting untouched in the center, likely for vendors or display. "Ran out," Dante repeated. "And what is in the box?" The busboy shifted his weight. It is the vendor meal, sir. It is what we feed the band and the security team. Fried chicken and potato salad." "Fried chicken," Dante said. "At a black tie wedding, for the sister of the bride." The busboy looked like he wanted to vanish. "She said, Ms. Patricia said you would prefer it, sir. She said it was more your speed." I felt the blood drain from my face. It was not just an insult. It was a racial stereotype wrapped in a class insult, wrapped in a mother's betrayal. She was telling the entire room that we did not have the palate for lobster. She was telling them we belonged with the help. "Thank you," Dante said. "You can go." The busboy ran. Dante reached out and opened the lid of the top box. Steam did not rise. The chicken was cold. The skin was soggy. A scoop of yellowish potato salad sat in the corner, looking congealed. It was a meal you wouldn't serve to a prisoner. I looked at Dante, expecting him to explode. I expected him to flip the table. I expected him to take the box and walk up to the head table and smash it into Brad's face. Instead, he laughed. It was a soft, dark chuckle. He reached into the box, picked up a drumstick, inspected it, and dropped it back in. Then he wiped his fingers on the tablecloth. "What is funny?" I asked, my voice trembling. "They are feeding us garbage, Dante." He turned his chair so he was facing the main dining area. He looked at the table next to us where the senator and his wife were struggling to crack their lobster claws. "Look at that lobster, Zora," Dante said, nodding toward the senator's plate. "Look closely at the shell." I looked. It was a lobster. It was red. It looked fine to me. "I do not know what I am looking for," I said. "Look at the discoloration on the tail fan." Dante said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was meant only for me. "See those black spots? And look at the meat. It is stringy. It is gray around the edges. So it is bad lobster?" I asked. "It is grade 2, Cull," Dante said. "It is the bottom of the barrel. It is what they sell to chain restaurants for their discount seafood pasta. It is old. It was frozen twice. It probably tastes like rubber and iodine." He leaned back, watching Brad tear into his meal with gusto. "How do you know that?" I asked. "Because Dante said," a shark-like grin spreading across his face. "That lobster came from Apex Marine Supply. I know the box markings. I saw the delivery truck leaving when I pulled in." "Okay," I said. "So they used a cheap supplier. Brad is cheap. We knew that." "No, Zora, you do not understand." Dante turned to me. his eyes gleaming with a secret that was about to burn this whole place down. Apex Marine Supply is a subsidiary of Apex Holdings. I stared at him. Apex Holdings. That was Dante's private equity firm. The firm that nobody in this room knew he owned because he kept his name off the letterhead and operated through shell companies. "You own the lobster company," I whispered. "I own the lobster company," Dante confirmed. "I own the cattle ranch that supplied that Wagyu beef, which is actually just standard Angus beef with a fancy label because the ranch manager was cutting corners. And most importantly, I acquired the catering company that is serving this food 3 days ago." He looked back at the head table. Brad was chewing with his mouth open, gesturing with a lobster claw, looking like a king. "I was going through the audits this morning," Dante said calmly. "That is why I was late. I found out the regional director of the supply chain was offloading expired inventory to event venues and pocketing the difference. He was selling trash as treasure. And I asked, my heart starting to race. And I fired him at 8 a.m., Dante said. "I fired the entire executive team. I shut down the distribution center an hour ago to start a full internal investigation. That food they are eating, it is contraband. It is the last shipment of the corruption I just cut out of my business." He looked at the styrofoam box of cold chicken in front of us. "Patricia did us a favor," he said. "This chicken might be cold, and it might be an insult, but at least it is honest. That lobster, that is the taste of a failing business model, and Brad is stuffing his face with it." He reached for the wine glass of the guest sitting at the table behind us. The guest, a man I did not know, had gone to the restroom. Dante picked up the full glass of red wine. He held it up to the light. "And this wine," Dante said, "Chateau Lacoste, another company I own shares in. This vintage had a cork taint issue. We recalled 40% of the cases." He took a sip, grimaced, and put it down. "Corked," he said. "It tastes like wet cardboard." He looked at me. "They are eating garbage, Zora. They are drinking vinegar, and they think it is luxury because someone put a high price tag on it. They are frauds eating fraud." He pushed the styrofoam box away. "I am not eating this," he said, "but I am going to enjoy the show. Because in about 10 minutes, Brad is going to get up and give a speech about excellence. He is going to talk about quality. He is going to talk about his bright future. And he has no idea that the man who owns the food in his mouth, the wine in his glass, and the job he thinks he has, is sitting at the kids' table in a t-shirt." I looked at Brad. He was wiping butter off his chin. He looked satisfied. He looked powerful. Then I looked at Dante. He was barefoot. He was hungry. But he was the only real thing in the room. "Let them eat," I said, a smile finally touching my lips. "Let them enjoy the meal." Dante took my hand. "Bon appetit," he whispered. And then the best man tapped his glass. The speeches were beginning. The trap was set. And Brad was about to walk right into it with a belly full of bad lobster. The air in the tent shifted from the quiet murmur of dining to the frantic, high-pitched energy of a game show. It was time for the gift exchange. In my family, or rather the version of my family that my parents had invented, gifts were not expressions of love. They were transactions. They were public declarations of net worth. You did not leave a card on a table. You walked up to the stage, you took the microphone, and you announced exactly how much you loved the happy couple in dollar signs. My father took the stage first. He was sweating through his tuxedo, his face flushed with the exertion of maintaining the charade. He signaled to the valet. A low hum filled the air, and a white Porsche Cayenne rolled up onto the grass just outside the clear tent walls. It had a red bow on the hood the size of a beach ball. Chantel screamed. It was a sound that shattered glass. She ran to the edge of the tent, pressing her hands against the plastic, vibrating with greed. "For my Princess," Vernon announced, his voice booming over the speakers. "Because you deserve to ride in style." The crowd erupted. Brad high-fived my father. My mother dabbed at her eyes, looking around to make sure everyone saw her benevolence. It was disgusting. I knew that car was leased. I knew my father had taken out a second mortgage on their house to pay the down payment, but in this moment, they were the kings of Atlanta. Next came Brad's college friends, a group of men who looked like they had been cloned in a country club lab. They presented a giant cardboard check. It was for a 2-week honeymoon in the Maldives. First class, overwater bungalow, private chef, more screaming, more applause. The bar had been set. The air was thick with the smell of money and envy. And then the MC looked at his list. He frowned. He looked at table 45. Next up, he said, his voice dropping a few decibels. We have the bride's sister Zora and her guest. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. It was the silence of people waiting for a car crash. Dante stood up. He wiped his hands on his jeans. He picked up the thin white envelope from the table. I picked up the wooden box I had been guarding all night. It was heavy, made of polished mahogany, smelling of beeswax and history. We walked toward the stage. It was a long walk, the longest walk of my life. I could feel the eyes of every person in that tent crawling over my skin. They were looking at the wine stain on my dress, which had dried into a dark, jagged map of humiliation. They were looking at Dante's bare feet, which made no sound on the hardwood floor. They were looking at us like we were the court jesters coming to entertain the royals. We climbed the stairs to the stage. Brad and Chantel were standing there holding court. Chantel was still clutching the keys to the Porsche. Brad was swirling a fresh glass of scotch. Well, Brad said into his microphone, broadcasting his disdain to the entire room, if it isn't the wet bandits. What do you have there? Zora, did you bring us some leftovers from the dumpster? The crowd tittered. I stepped forward. I did not take the microphone. I did not need it. My voice was steady, fueled by a cold, hard rage. I brought you something real, Chantel, I said. I held out the box. Chantel looked at it suspiciously. She handed her Porsche keys to Brad and took the box with 2 fingers, as if she were afraid it might be contagious. Is it heavy? She asked, wrinkling her nose. Why does it smell like an old library? Just open it, I said. She flipped the latch. She opened the lid. She reached inside and pulled out the object I had spent 6 months restoring. It was a porcelain figurine. To the uneducated eye, it was just a statue of a shepherdess. But it was Meissen porcelain from the mid-18th century. It had been shattered in a fire in Paris during the Revolution. I had found the pieces in an estate auction in New Orleans. I had spent hundreds of hours matching the shards, recreating the glaze, gilding the edges with real 24-karat gold leaf. It was flawless. It was a piece of history. It was valued at $50,000. Chantel held it up by the head. She looked at it. She turned it around. Then she looked at me. What is this? She asked. It is Meissen, I said. It is from 1750. I restored it for you. It represents resilience. It represents putting broken things back together. Chantel laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. She looked at the crowd. She got me a doll, she announced. My sister the scavenger went through her trash pile and brought me a broken doll. The crowd laughed with her. They didn't know art. They knew labels. They knew shiny cars and big checks. They saw a dusty old statue and they saw a joke. Zora, Chantel said, looking at me with pity. This is embarrassing. Look at this thing. It is creepy. It has a crack in the base. Did you glue this together in your garage? It is an antique, I said, my voice tightening. It is worth more than your dress. Chantel rolled her eyes. Honey, my dress is Vera Wang. This is goodwill. I don't want your trash, Zora. I don't want your bad juju in my house. This looks like something that is haunted. She held the statue out over the edge of the stage. Please don't, I said. Oops, she said. She let go. The statue fell. It hit the edge of the stage, bounced and landed on the hardwood floor below. The sound was sickening, a sharp final crack. The shepherdess shattered into 100 pieces. The gold leaf I had carefully applied lay scattered among the dust. The crowd gasped, then laughed. It was funny to them. It was slapstick. The poor sister bringing her garbage gifts, and the rich sister rejecting them. Chantel dusted off her hands. "Next time, get me a gift card," she said. "Or just stay home." I looked at the shards of my work. I looked at the hours of love and labor lying broken on the floor. I felt Dante's hand on my back. It was hot. It was steady. He stepped forward. "That was a mistake," Dante said. His voice was not loud, but the microphone Brad was holding picked it up. It boomed through the speakers. Brad stepped in front of Chantel, puffing out his chest. "Back off, mechanic," Brad said. "She didn't want your wife's trash. Get over it. Now, do you have anything for us, or are you just here to muddy up my stage?" Dante held up the white envelope. It was thin. It was unassuming. Compared to the Porsche keys and the giant check, it looked pathetic. "I have this," Dante said. Brad snatched it out of his hand. He didn't even look at it. He didn't open it. He just held it, flapping it around like a fan. "Let me guess." Brad mocked. "A coupon for a free tire rotation? A gift certificate to Waffle House? Or is it an IOU?" Dante didn't answer. He just watched Brad. You know what Brad said, looking down at the table where the wedding cake was displayed? "This table has been wobbling all night. It is driving me crazy. I was worried the cake was going to slide off." He knelt down. He took the white envelope. He folded it in half. Then he shoved it under the leg of the cake table. He stood up and shook the table. It was steady. "Perfect," Brad said, grinning at the crowd. "Finally, a useful gift from the in-laws." "Thanks, buddy. That is the most support you have ever given me." The crowd roared. They clapped. They whistled. It was the ultimate insult. My husband's gift. The envelope that I knew contained the power to end Brad's career was being used to prop up a cake. Brad dusted off his knees. "All right, folks," he shouted. "Let's cut this cake. And someone get a broom for that broken pottery on the floor. It is a safety hazard." Dante looked at the envelope wedged under the table leg. He looked at Brad, who was preening for the cameras. "You should have opened it," Dante said. Brad laughed. "I will open it when the table needs another shim," he said. "Now get off my stage. You are ruining the vibe." Dante took my hand. He led me down the stairs. We walked past the shattered remains of the Meissen statue. I wanted to stop. I wanted to pick up the pieces, but Dante pulled me forward. "Leave it," he whispered. "It is part of the lesson." We walked back to table 45. We sat down in the wet chairs. The party continued around us. The cake was cut. The champagne flowed. Brad gave another toast, raising his glass to his own brilliance. But I watched the table leg. I watched the white envelope sitting there compressed under the weight of their excess. They thought it was trash. They thought it was paper. They didn't know it was a demolition order. And as Brad laughed, oblivious and arrogant, I leaned back in my chair and waited for the fuse to burn down. The cake-cutting ceremony ended with a round of applause that felt more like a business transaction than a celebration. Chantel wiped frosting off Brad's nose with a napkin, her smile tight, and camera ready. But Brad was already done with the romance portion of the evening. He handed his cake plate to a passing server without taking a second bite. He grabbed the microphone from the stand. He signaled to the sound technician to cut the music. He was not done talking. He was never done talking. He loosened his bow tie. He unbuttoned the top button of his tuxedo shirt. He looked like a politician at a fundraiser after the polls had closed. He looked like a man who believed he had already won the election. "Can I get everyone's attention again?" he boomed. The speakers squealed with feedback, but he ignored it. "Just one more thing. I know we are here to celebrate my beautiful wife." He gestured vaguely toward Chantel, who was busy checking her makeup in the reflection of a silver platter. "But I also want to celebrate something else," he continued. "I want to celebrate the future. You see, today marks a turning point. Not just for me personally, but for my career. And since so many of my esteemed colleagues and investors are here tonight, I think it is the perfect time to make an announcement." I felt Dante shift in the chair beside me. His leg brushed against mine. He was not tense. He was relaxed. He was watching Brad with the same expression one might watch a drunk driver speeding toward a cliff. Brad paced the stage. He held the microphone like a scepter. "As many of you know, I have been working on a deal for the past 6 months," he said. "A deal that some said was impossible. A deal that required vision, grit, and a killer instinct." He paused for effect. The corporate bros at table 3 cheered. They raised their glasses. "Well, folks, I am proud to announce that as of yesterday the ink is dry," he shouted. "My company has officially merged with Apex Holdings." A murmur went through the crowd. Apex Holdings was a name that commanded respect. It was a private equity firm known for aggressive acquisitions and turning mid-level companies into global powerhouses. It was also known for being incredibly secretive. "That is right," Brad said, basking in the reaction. "Apex Holdings has injected $500 million into our operations." $500 million. "And part of that deal involves a restructuring of leadership." He puffed out his chest. He looked like a rooster crowing at dawn. "I have been tapped for a new role," he said. "Starting Monday, I will be the new vice president of global sales." The tent erupted. My father stood up and clapped so hard his hands must have stung. My mother looked around beaming as if she had personally negotiated the contract. Chantel clapped politely, but her eyes were scanning the room to see who was looking at her. She was already calculating how many designer bags a vice president's salary could buy. Thank you," Brad said, soaking it in. He held up a hand for silence. "But here is the kicker. The owner of Apex Holdings, the man behind the curtain. He is a legend. His name is Sterling. No first name, just Sterling. Nobody knows much about him. He is a ghost. He stays in the shadows. He moves money around like a chess grandmaster." Dante let out a small, soft sound. It might have been a laugh. It might have been a snort. I looked at him. He was staring at the tablecloth, tracing a pattern on the plastic with his finger. Brad continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "They say Sterling is ruthless. They say he cuts dead weight without mercy. They say he values only one thing: results. And that is why he chose us. That is why he chose me. Because he recognizes a fellow shark. He knows that I do not take no for an answer. He knows that I will do whatever it takes to close the deal." Brad walked to the edge of the stage. He looked out over the crowd. His eyes landed on the VIP section. He nodded at his boss. He nodded at the senator. "I have never met Mr. Sterling," Brad said. "But I feel like I know him. We are cut from the same cloth. We are men of action. We are men of vision. I am sure that when we finally meet, he is going to love my style. I am going to walk into his office and I am going to show him exactly why I am the future of this company." I looked at the white envelope wedged under the leg of the cake table. It was right there. It was sitting in plain sight. Inside that envelope was the signature of Dante Sterling. Inside that envelope was the proof that Brad's hero was actually the man he had called a grease monkey. Brad's eyes kept moving. They swept past the VIP tables. They swept past the dance floor. They landed on table 45. They landed on us. His smile twisted. It became something ugly, something petty. "You know," he said, his voice changing tone. "Talking about vision makes me think about perspective. It makes me think about the different paths we take in life." He pointed the microphone directly at Dante. "Take my brother-in-law here," Brad said. "Dante, look at him." The crowd turned. 200 heads swiveled to look at the back corner of the tent. They looked at Dante sitting in his t-shirt with his arms crossed. "Now Dante is a good guy," Brad said, his voice dripping with condescension. "He works hard. I am sure he fixes a hell of a transmission. He gets his hands dirty. He keeps the world moving. And we need people like that. We really do." He paused, waiting for the laughter. It came. A ripple of amusement from the people who had never changed a tire in their lives. "But there is a difference between labor and leadership," Brad said. "There is a difference between fixing a machine and building an empire. Dante here spends his life looking at the underside of cars. He spends his life looking at the ground. He worries about oil leaks and brake pads. That is his world. It is small, it is greasy, and it is limited. Dante did not move. He did not blink. He just watched Brad with that terrifying stillness. I, on the other hand, Brad continued gesturing grandly to the tent around him. I look at the horizon. I look at the big picture. I understand leverage. I understand capital. I understand how to move mountains with a signature. That is the difference between us. That is why I am standing on this stage wearing a $5,000 tuxedo and he is sitting by the garbage in a Hanes undershirt. My mother laughed. It was a nervous laugh, but it was loud enough to be heard. She was signaling her allegiance. She was siding with the winner. It is not his fault, Brad said, feigning magnanimity. Not everyone is born with the capacity for greatness. Some people are just meant to serve. Some people are meant to stay in the background. And honestly, it is better that way. If everyone was a chief, there would be no Indians, right? The racial undertone of the comment hung in the air, heavy and gross. A few people shifted uncomfortably, but most just nodded along, drunk on free wine and the proximity to power. So let this be a lesson, Brad said, raising his glass again. To ambition, to vision, to knowing your place in the world, and to Mr. Sterling, whoever he is. I hope he is watching. I hope he knows that his investment is in good hands. Because I am just getting started. I am going to take Apex Holdings to the moon. And people like Dante, well, they can watch us fly from down there in the mud. He toasted the air. He downed his drink. He slammed the glass onto a passing waiter's tray. Thank you, everyone, he shouted. Now let's party. The DJ is going to spin some tracks. Do not let the riffraff ruin your night. The music started. A heavy bass beat thumped through the speakers. Brad jumped off the stage, high-fiving his friends. He looked euphoric. He looked untouchable. I turned to Dante. My hands were shaking not from cold, but from rage. He just insulted you in front of everyone, I said. He used you as a prop for his ego. He called you a servant. Dante turned his chair. He faced me. His face was calm, but his eyes were like black holes. They were absorbing all the light in the room. He did, Dante said softly. He gave a very nice speech, very articulate. How can you be so calm, I asked. I want to scream. I want to tell them who you are. Not yet, Dante said. He put a hand on my knee. His touch was grounding. Why, I asked. Why wait? Because Dante said, looking at Brad, who was now dancing with my mother, spinning her around while she giggled like a schoolgirl. Because he just dug his own grave, Zora. He just stood on a stage and told the owner of his company that he is a visionary. He just insulted his boss to his face. He just violated the morality clause of his contract in front of 200 witnesses. He didn't just insult me, he gave me cause. Cause for what I asked. Cause to terminate him without severance, Dante said. Cause to void his stock options. Cause to ruin him legally and financially. He looked at the table leg. He looked at the white envelope. He thinks that envelope is trash, Dante said. He thinks it is a piece of paper to stop a table from wobbling. He doesn't know that it is a loaded gun. Dante reached into his pocket. He pulled out his phone. It was a simple black smartphone. No case, no flash. He unlocked the screen. He opened an app. It was an email client. I saw the subject line of the draft he had open. Urgent notice of corporate restructuring. He looked at me. Are you ready? He asked. I looked at Brad. He was doing a shot of tequila with the best man. He was laughing. He was the king of the world. Yes, I said. I am ready. Dante tapped the screen. Sent, he whispered. For a moment nothing happened. The music kept playing. The people kept dancing. Brad kept laughing. Then a phone chirped. It was a sharp, distinctive notification sound. It came from the VIP table near the stage where the board of directors sat. Then another chirp. Then another. Suddenly the room was filled with the sound of notifications. Ding, ding, buzz, chirp. It rippled through the tent like a wave. Every person wearing a suit, every person with a corporate title, every member of Brad's team. Their phones lit up simultaneously. The dancing slowed. People stopped moving. They reached into their pockets. They reached into their purses. Brad stopped laughing. He felt his own phone vibrate in his tuxedo pocket. He pulled it out. He frowned. He looked at the screen. I watched his face. I watched the color drain out of it. I watched his eyes widen. I watched his mouth fall open. He looked up. He looked around the room. He saw his colleagues reading the same email. He saw the confusion on their faces. He saw the fear. Then he looked at the sender. I saw his lips move. I saw him mouth the name, Sterling. He looked around the room frantically. He was looking for a suit. He was looking for an old white man. He was looking for the legend he had just praised. He didn't look at table 45. Why would he? We were the help. We were the background. Dante stood up. He didn't rush. He stood up slowly, unfolding his frame. He picked up his boots. He dropped them on the ground. He slid his feet into them. He didn't tie the laces. He adjusted his t-shirt. He ran a hand through his hair. He looked at me. "Showtime," he said. He began to walk toward the stage. He walked through the crowd of confused executives. He walked past my parents who were staring at their phones trying to understand why the music had stopped. He walked past Chantel, who was yelling at the DJ to turn the bass back up. He walked right up to Brad. Brad was staring at his phone. He was trembling. Dante reached out. He took the microphone from Brad's limp hand. Brad didn't fight him. He didn't even notice. He was too busy reading the email that was ending his life. Dante tapped the microphone. Thump, thump. The sound echoed through the silent tent. "Excuse me," Dante said, his voice booming through the speakers. "I hate to interrupt the party, but I believe the groom has something he needs to read to the class." Brad looked up. He looked at Dante. He looked at the t-shirt. He looked at the boots. And then he looked at the eyes. And for the first time all night he saw it. He saw the predator. "Who are you?" Brad whispered, his voice shaking. Dante smiled. "Read the signature, Brad," Dante said. "Read the name at the bottom of the email." Brad looked down at his phone. He looked back up at Dante. "Sterling," he whispered. "Dante Sterling." "That is right," Dante said. "I am Dante Sterling, owner of Apex Holdings, majority shareholder of your company, and the man you just called dirt." Dante turned to the crowd. "And I have some bad news about the merger." The bass from the DJ booth was vibrating the floorboards, thumping against the soles of my feet inside Dante's oversized wool socks. Brad was still on the stage, high-fiving his best man, his face glistening with sweat and self-satisfaction. He looked like a man who believed he had just conquered the world. He had insulted my husband, he had mocked my family, and he had declared himself the king of corporate America. He was soaking in the applause, oblivious to the fact that he was standing on a trapdoor. I looked at Dante. He was sitting perfectly still in his plastic chair, his body relaxed but his eyes alert. He did not look angry anymore. He looked surgical. He reached into the pocket of his jeans and pulled out his phone. It was not the latest model. It did not have a gold case. It was a functional black tool with a cracked screen protector. To anyone else, it looked like a burner phone. To me, it looked like the detonator. He tapped the screen once to wake it up. The glow illuminated his face, highlighting the sharp angle of his jaw. He typed a short sequence of characters. It was not a text message. It was a command code for the secure server at Apex Holdings. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper over the thumping music. Dante did not look at me. He looked at Brad, who was now pouring champagne into a tower of glasses, laughing as the foam spilled over onto the stage. "He violated Clause 4, Dante said calmly. "He publicly disparaged the ownership. He claimed credit for a merger he didn't negotiate, and he insulted my wife." I am not just sure, Zora. I am obligated. He hovered his thumb over the send button. Watch the table to the left of the stage, he said. Watch the board of directors. I looked. Table 1 was the VIP table. It was populated by 6 men and 2 women, all in expensive suits, all looking slightly bored by the wedding, but happy about the open bar. These were the people Brad had been preening for all night. The decision makers. The people who thought they were in charge. Dante pressed his thumb down. Sent, he said. He put the phone face down on the table. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. The music continued. The strobe lights flashed. Brad chugged a glass of champagne. Chantel was busy taking a selfie with her bridesmaids, oblivious to everything except her own reflection. Then it started. It began with a single chime. A sharp digital ping that cut through a lull in the music. One of the men at table 1 reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out his phone, frowning. Then another ping. And another. Suddenly the VIP table lit up like a Christmas tree. Every phone on the table buzzed and flashed simultaneously. It was a synchronized wave of notifications. The priority 1 alert tone of the company's internal communication system. It was a sound that meant crisis. It was a sound that meant the stock was crashing or the building was on fire. The dancing at the tables near the front slowed down. People noticed the shift in energy. The board members were no longer looking at the bride and groom. They were staring at their screens. I watched the man at the head of table 1. He was the current CEO, a man named Mr. Henderson. He had been laughing a moment ago. Now his face was gray. He adjusted his glasses, squinting at the screen, as if he could not believe what he was reading. He scrolled down. He stopped. He looked up and scanned the room, his eyes wide with panic. He leaned over to the woman next to him, the chief financial officer. She was already reading. Her hand was covering her mouth. They exchanged a look of absolute terror. "What is happening?" my mother whispered from the table behind us. "Why is everyone checking their phones?" I did not answer her. I just watched. On stage, Brad felt the vibration. He reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out his phone. He grinned at the crowd. "Looks like my phone is blowing up," he shouted into the microphone. "Probably congratulatory text from the London office. They never sleep." He unlocked his phone. He was so confident, so sure of his invincibility. He swiped down to open his notifications. I saw the moment the words hit him. It was physical. His knees buckled slightly. The grin slid off his face like it had been slapped away. He blinked rapidly, trying to clear his vision, trying to make the words change. The email was not from London. It was not a congratulation. Dante slid his phone across the table to me, so I could see what they were reading. The subject line was written in bold red letters. Urgent notice of corporate restructuring and immediate termination of executive personnel. I read the preview text. Effective immediately, the board of directors of Apex Holdings has initiated a zero-tolerance review of all leadership positions within the acquired subsidiary. Pursuant to the acquisition agreement signed 72 hours ago, the following personnel are relieved of their duties due to gross violation of the Corporate Ethics and Conduct Clause. I looked back at the stage. Brad was scrolling. His thumb was moving frantically. He was looking for his name. He was praying it was a mistake. He was praying it was a prank. He found it. I knew he found it because he dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a deafening screech of feedback that made half the room cover their ears. The sound cut through the party like a siren. The DJ killed the music instantly. The silence that rushed into the tent was heavy and suffocating. Brad stood there staring at his phone. His hands were shaking. He looked pale. He looked like a ghost in a tuxedo. Mr. Henderson, the CEO, stood up at table 1. He looked furious. He looked terrified. He was looking at his own phone, then looking at Brad, then looking around the room for answers. "Brad," Chantel asked, her voice shrill in the sudden silence. "Brad, what is it? What is wrong?" Brad did not answer her. He looked up from his phone. He looked at Mr. Henderson. "Sir," he stammered, his voice barely audible without the mic. "Sir, I just got an email. It says I am terminated. It says effective immediately." Mr. Henderson walked up to the edge of the stage. He was trembling. "We all got it, Brad," he hissed. "The whole board. We have all been flagged for review. But you—" He looked at his phone again, reading the text. "You have been terminated for cause: moral turpitude, public disparagement of the ownership, gross negligence of brand reputation." Brad looked around the room, wild-eyed. "Ownership," he said. "What ownership? I haven't met the owners. I don't even know who they are. I just gave a speech praising them." "You gave a speech praising yourself," Mr. Henderson snapped. "And you insulted the guest list. And apparently the new majority shareholder was listening." "Who?" Brad shouted. "Who was listening? There is nobody here but us. It is just family and friends. Who is Sterling?" The name hung in the air. Sterling. Dante took a sip of water from my glass. He looked calm. He looked bored. I watched Brad's mind try to work. He was looking for a spy. He was looking for a hidden camera. He looked at the waiters. He looked at the band. He looked at the senator. Then his phone buzzed again. A second email. He looked down. This one was shorter. It was a direct notification from the legal department of Apex Holdings. "Mr. Bradley Miller, your company credit cards have been suspended. Your access to the building has been revoked. Your severance package has been voided due to the nature of your termination. Please return all company property immediately. This includes the vehicle currently parked in the valet lot." "My car," Brad whispered. "They took my company car." He looked at Chantel. She was staring at him with horror. She wasn't worried about his job. She was worried about the Porsche. She realized that if Brad was broke, the lease on her gift was going to bounce. "Brad, this cannot be real," she said, gripping his arm. "Fix it. Call someone. Call this Sterling guy. Tell him it is a mistake. Tell him it is our wedding day." Brad looked at her. He looked like he was about to vomit. "I can't call him," he said. "I don't have his number. Nobody has his number. He is a ghost." Dante cleared his throat. It was a small sound, but in the silence of the tent, it sounded like a gunshot. He pushed his chair back. The plastic legs scraped against the wood floor. He stood up. He picked up his boots. He did not put them on. He just held them. He began to walk toward the stage. He did not walk fast. He walked with a slow, deliberate gait. The crowd parted for him. They didn't know why. They just knew that the energy in the room had shifted toward him. He was the gravity. Brad saw him coming. His eyes narrowed. "Not now, Dante," he snapped, his voice cracking. "I am dealing with a crisis. I do not have time for your petty jealousy. Get back to your table." Dante kept walking. He walked past the CEO. He walked past the senator. He walked up the stairs to the stage. He stood in front of Brad. He was barefoot. He was wearing a t-shirt. He was holding a pair of work boots. And he looked like the most powerful man on earth. He reached into his back pocket. He pulled out a black Sharpie marker. He reached for the cake table. He reached for the leg where Brad had stuffed the white envelope. "What are you doing?" Brad demanded, stepping back. "Get away from the cake." Dante ignored him. He pulled the envelope out from under the table leg. The table wobbled slightly but held. Dante held up the envelope. It was wrinkled. It had a smudge of dirt on it from the floor. "You should have opened this, Brad," Dante said. His voice was not amplified, but everyone heard him. "It is a gift," Brad sneered, trying to regain some control. "It is probably a $20 bill. I don't need your charity." Dante uncapped the Sharpie. He wrote something on the front of the envelope. One word in big, bold black letters: void. He handed the envelope to Brad. "Open it," Dante said. Brad hesitated. He looked at the envelope. He looked at Dante's face. He saw something there that terrified him. He took the envelope. He ripped it open. His fingers were shaking so bad he almost dropped it. He pulled out the contents. It was not a gift card. It was not cash. It was a single sheet of heavy legal bond paper. It had a letterhead embossed in gold foil. The logo was a stylized mountain peak, Apex Holdings. Brad read the document. His lips moved silently. This is a non-compete agreement, he whispered. Keep reading, Dante said. Brad's eyes scanned down the page. And this is a termination notice, signed by the chairman. He looked at the signature at the bottom of the page. It was a bold, sweeping signature. D. Sterling. Brad looked up. He looked at Dante. He looked at the signature. He looked back at Dante. Sterling, he said. Dante. Sterling, Dante said. The realization hit Brad like a physical blow. He staggered back, hitting the DJ booth. No, he whispered. No. That is impossible. You are a mechanic. You drive a truck. You fix cars. I fix companies, Dante corrected him. And I fix problems. And Brad, you are a problem. A gasp went through the room. My mother stood up, knocking her chair over. My father looked like he was having a stroke. You own Apex Holdings, Brad stammered. You own my company. I own your company, Dante said. I own the mortgage on this venue. I own the catering service. And as of 30 seconds ago, I own your career. He stepped closer to Brad. You called me dirt, Dante said softly. You called my wife a dog. You made her sit in the rain. You fed her garbage. You thought because I didn't wear a suit, I didn't matter. Dante gestured to the room. Look around, Brad. Look at all these fancy people. Look at all this expensive decor. It is all rented. It is all borrowed. None of it is yours. He pointed to the exit, the car in the lot. It belongs to the company, the phone in your hand. It belongs to the company, the job title you were bragging about. It belongs to the company, and the company belongs to me. Brad looked at the phone in his hand. He looked at the car keys on the table. He looked like a man who had just realized he was naked. You can't do this, he pleaded, his arrogance replaced by pure panic. It is my wedding day. Please. I didn't know. If I had known... If you had known I was rich, you would have treated me with respect. Dante finished. That is the problem, Brad. You only respect money. You don't respect people. And I do not hire people who don't respect people. Dante turned to the crowd. He looked at the board of directors. Mr. Henderson, Dante called out. The CEO jumped to attention. Yes, sir, Mr. Sterling, sir. Escort Mr. Miller off the property, Dante said. And collect his phone and keys before he leaves. We don't want any proprietary data leaving the premises. Mr. Henderson nodded frantically. He signaled to the security team. The same security team Brad had hired. They moved toward the stage, not to protect the groom but to remove him. Brad looked at Chantel. She was staring at him with horror. She was looking at a man with no job, no car, and no future. Chantel, baby, say something, Brad begged. Tell him he can't do this. He is your brother-in-law. Chantel looked at Dante. Then she looked at me, sitting at table 45. She looked at the wine stain on my dress. She didn't say a word. She took a step away from Brad. Dante walked down the stairs. He walked back to our table. He sat down. He put his boots on. He tied the laces slowly, methodically. Then he looked at me. Ready to go, he asked. I stood up. I looked at the chaos erupting around us. Brad was shouting as security took his phone. My parents were arguing with each other. The guests were frantically texting. Yes, I said. I am ready. We walked toward the exit. We walked past my mother who was clutching her pearls, looking at us with a mixture of fear and awe. Zora, she whispered, reaching out a hand. Zora, wait. We didn't know. I stopped. I looked at her hand, the hand that had pushed me into the bathroom. I know you didn't, Mom, I said. And that is why it is too late. We walked out into the night. The rain had stopped. The air was clean. We got into the truck. The engine roared to life. and as we drove away, I didn't look back. I looked forward at the road ahead, illuminated by the headlights of my husband's truck. It was a beautiful road, and it was all ours. The music had died, but the air in the tent was vibrating with a different kind of frequency. It was the hum of panic. It was the sound of 100 corporate egos simultaneously realizing they were not the biggest fish in the pond. I watched the scene unfold from table 45 with a calm that felt almost dangerous. My husband sat beside me, leaning back in his plastic chair, his arms crossed over his chest, watching the chaos he had orchestrated with the patience of a man who had already read the last page of the book. On stage, Brad was no longer the rooster crowing at the dawn. He was a statue. He was staring at the screen of his phone as if it were a portal to hell. His thumb hovered over the glass, trembling. I could see the reflection of the screen in the sweat beading on his forehead. He read the email. Then he read it again, and then a third time. His lips moved, forming shapes that looked like denial. The silence in the tent was heavy, broken only by the occasional gasp from the VIP table, as the board of directors finished reading their own copies of the notification. Mr. Henderson, the CEO, who had been laughing at Dante's boots 10 minutes ago, was now wiping his face with a silk handkerchief, his complexion the color of old ash. Brad looked up. His eyes were wide and unseeing. He looked at Mr. Henderson. Sir Brad whispered, his voice cracking into the microphone he had forgotten he was holding. The sound of his fear was amplified, echoing through the speakers for everyone to hear. Sir, who sent this? Mr. Henderson stood up. He did not look at Brad. He looked past him. He looked toward the back of the tent. He looked toward the darkness where the garden met the woods. He looked toward us. Read the signature, Brad. Mr. Henderson said, his voice shaking. Read the signature at the bottom of the order. Brad looked back down at his phone. He scrolled to the bottom of the email. He squinted. Dante. Brad read. The word hung there. A simple name. A common name. Dante, who Brad asked. He looked up, confusion warring with terror. There is no Dante on the board. There is no Dante in the C-suite. Who is Dante? Keep reading, Dante said from beside me. He did not shout. He did not raise his voice. He simply spoke into the silence, and his voice carried with a weight that made the crystal glasses on the tables shiver. Brad's head snapped toward table 45. He peered into the gloom. He saw the man in the gray t-shirt. He saw the man with the work boots. He saw the man he had called a servant. Brad looked back at his phone. He read the rest of the name, Dante Sterling. Brad read, Chairman of the Board, Apex Holdings. He stopped. His brain tried to make the connection. It tried to bridge the gap between the titan of industry who had just bought his company and the mechanic sitting next to the garbage cans. The cognitive dissonance was almost visible. You could see the sparks flying behind his eyes as his reality fractured. Sterling, Brad whispered. Dante Sterling. He looked at Dante. He looked at the truck parked on the lawn. He looked at the t-shirt. No, Brad said. No. That is a coincidence. That is a joke. You are Dante. Just Dante. You fix cars. You are Zora's husband. You are poor. Dante stood up. He did not jump up. He did not rush. He rose with a slow hydraulic power like a mountain rising from the sea. He stood to his full height. He brushed an invisible speck of dust from his cashmere shirt. He looked at me. He winked. Then he stepped away from the table. He walked into the light. The crowd parted for him. It was instinct. They did not know who he was, not really, but they sensed the shift in gravity. They sensed that the man walking down the center aisle was not a guest. He was not a spectator. He was the event. Mr. Henderson scrambled out from behind the VIP table. He rushed toward Dante, his hand extended, his posture hunched in submission. Mr. Sterling, Henderson stammered. Mr. Sterling, I had no idea. We were not told. If we had known you were attending. Dante did not stop walking. He did not shake Henderson's hand. He simply looked at him as he passed. You were not told because I wanted to see what you do when you think no one is watching, Dante said. And I have seen enough. Henderson recoiled as if he had been burned. He shrank back into the crowd looking for a hole to crawl into. Dante kept walking. His boots thudded against the wooden flooring. Thud, thud, thud. It was the heartbeat of the room. He walked past my parents. My mother was clutching her pearls, her mouth gaping open like a fish. My father was staring at Dante with a look of dawning horror, realizing that the man he had sent to the service entrance was the man who owned the bank that held his mortgage. Dante reached the stairs to the stage. He walked up them. 1, 2, 3. He stood in front of Brad. Up close, the difference was stark. Brad was wearing a tuxedo that cost $5,000. He was groomed, polished, and manicured. Dante was wearing clothes that looked like they had lived a life. He had grease under one fingernail. His hair was windblown. But Brad looked like a boy playing dress-up. Dante looked like a king who had just returned from war. Brad took a step back. He almost tripped over the train of Chantel's dress. Chantel was staring at Dante, her eyes wide, her mind racing to recalculate the hierarchy of her universe. You, Brad stammered. You are, Sterling. Dante reached out. He took the microphone from Brad's hand. Brad let it go without a fight. His fingers were numb. Dante brought the microphone to his lips. He looked out at the sea of faces. He looked at the people who had laughed at his truck. He looked at the people who had eaten his food and drank his wine and judged his wife. Hello, everyone, Dante said. His voice was warm, rich, and terrifying. I apologize for the interruption. I know you were all enjoying the open bar. And I know you were all enjoying the speech about vision and leadership. He turned to look at Brad. Brad was trembling. He was sweating so much his collar was turning dark. Brad here had a lot to say about vision. Dante continued. He had a lot to say about knowing your place. He had a lot to say about the difference between the people who lead and the people who serve. Dante paused. He let the silence stretch until it was painful. I agree with him, Dante said. There is a difference. He took a step closer to Brad. The difference, Brad, is that a leader knows the value of every person in the room. A leader knows that the man fixing the engine is just as important as the man driving the car. A leader does not need to stand on a stage and humiliate people to feel tall. Dante turned back to the crowd. My name is Dante Sterling. I am the founder and chairman of Apex Holdings. And 3 days ago I acquired the company that employs this man. He pointed a thumb at Brad. I acquired it because I saw potential, I saw value, but I also have a very strict rule when I do business. It is a rule about culture. It is a rule about respect. Dante reached into his back pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was not the envelope from under the table. It was a copy of the contract Brad had signed. This is the merger agreement, Dante said. He unfolded it. He held it up. Clause number 4. Dante read, The Code of Ethics. He looked at Brad. It states that all senior leadership and executive personnel must maintain a standard of conduct that reflects the values of Apex Holdings. It states that any public display of discrimination, harassment, or gross disrespect toward community members, employees, or family is grounds for immediate termination with cause. Brad made a small choking sound. I did not know, Brad whispered. I did not know it was you. It does not matter that it was me, Dante roared. His voice exploded, filling the tent, making people jump. That is the point, Brad. It does not matter that I am the owner. It matters that I am a human being. It matters that my wife is a human being. Dante pointed at me. I was still sitting at table 45 watching him. I had never loved him more than I did in that moment. You forced her to sit in the rain, Dante said, his voice dropping back to a lethal whisper. You watched your wife throw wine on her. You called her a dog. You laughed at her. You treated her like she was garbage because she did not fit your picture of what a valuable person looks like. He turned back to Brad. You thought she was weak because she was kind. You thought I was weak because I was quiet. You judged us by our clothes. You judged us by our car. You judged us by the seat you assigned us next to the trash. Dante shook his head. Well, Brad, you were right about one thing. You said you wanted to show Mr. Sterling your style. You said you wanted to show him why you are the future. Dante leaned in. I have seen your style, Brad, and I have seen your future. He handed the microphone back to Brad. Brad took it automatically, his hand limp. And your future is not with Apex Holdings, Dante said. He turned to Mr. Henderson, who was cowering at the edge of the stage. Henderson, Dante said. Yes, sir, Henderson squeaked. Is this man the vice president of sales? Dante asked. No, Sir Henderson said quickly. No, sir. Absolutely not. Is he employed by this company in any capacity? Dante asked. No, Sir Henderson said. As of the timestamp on that email, he is terminated. He is a trespasser. Dante turned back to Brad. You heard him, Dante said. You are fired, Brad. You are fired for cause. That means no severance. That means no stock options. That means the non-compete clause you signed is active effective immediately. You cannot work in this industry in North America for 5 years. Brad dropped the microphone again. This time he did not even try to catch it. He fell to his knees. It was not a dramatic gesture, his legs just gave out. He knelt on the stage in his $5,000 tuxedo, looking up at the man in the t-shirt. Please, Brad begged. Please, I have a mortgage. I have the car. I have the wedding to pay for. Dante looked down at him. You should have thought about that before you called my wife a stray dog, Dante said. He looked at Chantel. She was standing frozen, clutching her bouquet like a weapon. Her face was a mask of pure horror. She was looking at Brad like he was a stranger. She was looking at the Porsche keys in his pocket and realizing they were worthless. And you, Dante said to Chantel. Chantel flinched. I do not employ you, Dante said, so I cannot fire you. But I can tell you this. That statue you broke, that piece of trash you threw on the floor. He pointed to the shards of the Meissen shepherdess. That was worth $50,000, Dante said. Zora restored it by hand. It was a masterpiece, and you smashed it because you thought it was cheap. He shook his head. You are the cheap one, Chantel, Dante said. You cost a lot of money, but you have no value. He turned away from them. He walked to the edge of the stage. He jumped down. He landed softly on his boots. He walked over to me. He held out his hand. Come on, Zora, he said. Let's go. This place smells like bad lobster. I stood up. I took his hand. I looked at my parents. They were sitting at their table staring at us. My father looked like he had aged 20 years in 20 seconds. My mother looked like she was trying to wake up from a nightmare. I did not say anything to them. I did not need to. The silence said everything. We walked out of the tent. We walked past the silent guests. We walked past the stunned waiters. We walked out into the cool night air. Behind us, the sound of chaos erupted. I heard Brad screaming. I heard Chantel crying. I heard the sound of a world collapsing, but we did not look back. We got into the truck. Dante started the engine. The V8 roared to life, drowning out the noise of their destruction. He put the truck in gear. He looked at me. You okay? He asked. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had burned down a kingdom to defend my honor. I am perfect, I said. He smiled. He drove us out the gate, leaving the illusion behind in the dust. Brad was on his knees in his $5,000 tuxedo, and he looked smaller than the plastic groom on top of the wedding cake. The silence in the tent was absolute. The only sound was the hum of the generator outside, and the ragged breathing of a man who had just watched his entire life disintegrate in the span of a single email. Please, Brad begged, his voice wet with desperation. Mr. Sterling, Dante, please. We can work this out. I will apologize. I will get on the microphone right now and apologize to Zora. I will apologize to you. Just don't take my job. Don't take my future. I have a mortgage. I have car payments. I have this wedding to pay for. Dante looked down at him with the dispassionate interest of a scientist observing a specimen under a microscope. He did not look angry anymore. He looked bored. He reached into the back pocket of his jeans again. "You keep talking about the future, Brad," Dante said. "But you seem to be confused about how contracts work." Dante pulled out a second document. It was folded into a crisp square. He unfolded it slowly. The paper crinkled loudly in the quiet tent. "Do you recognize this?" Dante asked, holding the paper in front of Brad's face. Brad squinted through his tears. He nodded slowly. "It is my employment contract," he whispered. "It is the addendum you signed when you accepted the promotion to vice president." Dante corrected him. "The promotion that never happened. But the signature is still valid." Dante pointed to a paragraph in the middle of the page. It was dense legal text, but Dante read it as if it were poetry. Clause 17. The non-compete agreement. Brad's head snapped up. His eyes bulged. "No," he gasped. "No, you can't. That is for voluntary resignation. It is for termination with cause." Dante said, his voice hard as iron. "And gross misconduct is cause." Dante began to read aloud, and his voice filled the room. "In the event of termination for cause, the employee agrees to a strict non-competition period of 60 months. During this time, the employee is prohibited from seeking employment consulting or contracting within the financial, real estate, or corporate sales sectors." Dante paused. He looked at the crowd. "That means 5 years, Brad." 5 years. He continued reading. "This restriction applies to all markets where Apex Holdings or its subsidiaries operate." Dante lowered the paper. He looked Brad in the eye. "We operate in 48 states, Brad. We operate in Canada. We operate in Mexico. We operate in Europe." He leaned in close. "You are banned, Brad. You are blacklisted. You cannot sell a house in Atlanta. You cannot trade a stock in New York. You cannot even sell a used car in Idaho without violating this contract. If you try, I will sue you for breach of contract, and I will take whatever pennies you have left." Brad made a sound like a dying animal. He slumped forward, his hands gripping his thighs. 5 years, he sobbed. "What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to be?" Dante shrugged. "I hear the grocery store is hiring," he said. "They are always looking for baggers. It is honest work. You might learn something about service." Dante dropped the contract onto the floor next to Brad's knees. "Good luck with the job hunt," Dante said. He turned and walked away. Brad stayed on his knees for a long moment, staring at the piece of paper that had just sentenced him to professional exile. His shoulders shook. His breathing was jagged. Then he slowly looked up. He didn't look at Dante. He didn't look at me. He looked at Chantel. My sister was standing near the edge of the stage, clutching her bouquet so hard the stems were snapping. Her face was a mask of horror, but it wasn't sympathy. It was revulsion. She was looking at Brad not as her husband, but as a bad investment. She was looking at him like he was a purse that had turned out to be a fake. Brad stood up. His movements were jerky and uncoordinated. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, smearing snot and tears across his cheek. His eyes were wild. He walked toward Chantel. "You," he hissed. Chantel took a step back. "Brad, calm down," she said, her voice high and frightened. "We can fix this. My dad will fix this. Your dad." Brad laughed. It was a manic, terrifying sound. "Your dad is a fraud, Chantel. Just like you. Just like this whole circus." He gestured violently at the room, at the flowers, at the chandeliers. "You wanted this," he screamed. "You wanted the plantation. You wanted the Porsche. You wanted the VP title. You pushed me. You told me I had to be a killer. You told me I had to be ruthless. I wanted us to be successful." Chantel cried, tears streaming down her face. I wanted us to have a good life. You wanted a show, Brad roared. You wanted to show off for your friends. You wanted to prove you were better than your sister. He pointed a shaking finger at me, sitting at table 45. You made me hate her, Brad yelled. You told me she was garbage. You told me she was jealous. You told me she was nothing. And I believed you. I treated the wife of the man who owns my life like dirt because of you. It is not my fault, Chantel sobbed. I didn't know he was rich. That is all you care about, Brad screamed. Money, status. You don't love me, you love the idea of me. And now that I am nothing, you are looking at me like I am a disease. He was right. And the truth of it broke him. He lunged at her. It happened in a blur of motion. The crowd screamed. My father tried to step forward, but he was too slow. Brad's hand connected with Chantel's cheek. It was a slap. A loud, sharp crack that echoed through the silent tent. It knocked Chantel sideways. She stumbled, her high heels twisting on the hardwood floor. She fell into the wedding cake table. The table shook. The 5-tier cake wobbled. The white fondant tower tilted. And then it fell. The cake crashed onto the floor in an explosion of sugar and sponge. Chantel landed in the frosting. Her beautiful custom gown was smeared with white icing and raspberry filling. She lay there, shocked, holding her cheek, screaming. Brad stood over her, panting. His hand was raised as if to strike again. Security Dante's voice cut through the chaos. The security guards who had been standing frozen by the entrance rushed the stage. They grabbed Brad. They pulled his arms behind his back. He didn't fight them. He just sagged limp and defeated. Get him out of here, Dante ordered. Hold him for the police. Assault is a felony. They dragged Brad away. He was sobbing now, screaming incoherent curses at Chantel, at me, at the world. My mother rushed to the stage. She knelt beside Chantel, trying to wipe the frosting off her dress. My baby, she wailed. My poor baby, look what they did to you. She looked at me. Her eyes were full of venom. This is your fault, she screamed at me. You and your husband. You ruined everything. You destroyed this family. I sat at table 45, and I didn't say a word. I just watched. I watched the ruin of their vanity. And I waited. Because the final blow had not even landed yet. My mother was on her knees fussing over Chantel, but her eyes kept darting around the stage. She was looking for something. Amidst the wreckage of the cake and the frosting and the tears, her greed was still operating on a survival frequency. She saw it. Under the leg of the overturned cake table lay the white envelope. The one Dante had given Brad. The one Brad had used as a shim. It had fallen out when the table crashed. It was lying there, slightly crumpled, stained, with a bit of raspberry filling. My mother stopped crying. She patted Chantel's shoulder absently, then she began to crawl. It was a pathetic sight. Patricia Williams, the woman who prided herself on elegance, crawling on her hands and knees across the frosting-smeared floor in her sequined gown. She reached for the envelope. She snatched it up. She thought it was money. She thought it was the salvation they needed. She thought Dante had been bluffing about voiding it. She ripped it open. Her hands were shaking so hard she tore the paper. She pulled out the contents. It was a check, a cashier's check. It was printed on heavy blue security paper. My father saw it too. He rushed over, helping her stand up. They huddled over the check like vultures over a carcass. Look at the amount, Vernon gasped. $1 million. The number was printed clearly. $1 million. It was a wedding gift. It was Dante's way of giving them the life they pretended to have. It was enough to pay off their debts. It was enough to buy a real house. It was enough to start over. But then they saw the black marker. Across the front of the check in bold, permanent strokes, Dante had written 4 letters. VOID. My mother let out a sound that was not human. It was a keen of pure agony. She stared at the word as if she could erase it with her eyes. No, she whispered. No, you can't do this. You can't give this and take it away. She looked at Dante. She looked at him with a mixture of hatred and begging. Why, she screamed, holding up the ruined check. Why would you do this? Dante stood up from table 45. He walked to the edge of the dance floor. Because Patricia, Dante said, I wanted you to see what you threw away. I wanted you to see the value of the man you called a grease monkey. That check was my gift to Zora's sister. It was an investment in her future. But I do not invest in people who abuse my wife. My mother fell to her knees again, clutching the check to her chest, as if she could revive it. But there was something else in the envelope. A second piece of paper fluttered to the floor. My father picked it up. He squinted at it. His face went white. What is this? Vernon asked, his voice trembling. Dante smiled. That, Dante said, is the bill. The bill, my father repeated. Read it, Dante said. My father read aloud. His voice was weak, barely audible. Invoice for services rendered. Oakwood Estate venue rental, $80,000. Catering services, $40,000. Floral arrangements, $20,000. Live entertainment, $15,000. Total amount due immediately, $250,000. My father looked up. But this is paid for, he stammered. Brad said the company paid for it. He said it was a perk. Brad lied, Dante said. Brad didn't have the budget for this. Brad was broke. Dante took a step closer. I paid for it, Dante said. A gasp went through the room. I sponsored this entire event anonymously, Dante explained. Through a shell company. I knew you couldn't afford it. I knew Brad couldn't afford it. And I knew Zora wanted her sister to have a nice day, so I paid the bills. I signed the contracts as the guarantor. He paused, letting the reality sink in. But I just withdrew my sponsorship, Dante said, cold and final. I just canceled the payment authorization. The contracts state that if the sponsor withdraws, the liability falls immediately to the signatories of the event. He pointed at my father. You signed the venue contract, Vernon. You signed the catering agreement. My father shook his head, backing away. I don't have that kind of money. I took out a second mortgage just for the deposit on the car. That is unfortunate, Dante said. Because the venue manager is standing right behind you, and he has a card reader. I looked toward the entrance. The venue manager, a stern man with a clipboard, was walking onto the floor. He was flanked by 2 police officers. Mr. Williams, the manager said, we have been notified that the primary funding for this event has been revoked. We require immediate settlement of the outstanding balance, $250,000, or we will be forced to press charges for theft of services. Theft, my mother shrieked, jumping up. We are not thieves. We are respectable people. Then pay the bill, Dante said. My mother looked at the voided check in her hand. She looked at the police officers. She looked at the guests who were now filming everything on their phones. She looked at me. Zora, she pleaded. Zora, do something. He is your husband. Tell him to fix this. Tell him to pay it. We are your family. I stood up. I walked over to them. I stood in front of my mother. I looked at her sequins. I looked at her desperate, tear-streaked face. Family, I asked. I looked at table 45. I looked at the rain-soaked chair. I looked at the trash can. You put me by the dumpster, Mom, I said. You told me I was a stain. You watched Chantel pour wine on me and you told me to hide. I touched the wine stain on my dress. It was dry now, stiff and dark. You didn't treat me like family, I said. You treated me like a prop. And now the show is over. And the props are being put away. Zora, please, my father begged. We will lose the house. They will arrest us. I know, I said. I looked at Dante. Let's go, I said. Dante nodded. He turned to the manager. Do what you have to do, he said. The manager nodded to the police officers. They stepped forward, taking handcuffs from their belts. Mr. and Mrs. Williams, the officer said, you are under arrest for theft of services and fraud. Please place your hands behind your backs. The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut was the loudest sound I had ever heard. My mother screamed. My father wept. Chantel sat in the cake frosting, staring blankly at the ruin of her life, and I turned away. I walked to the trash can at the edge of the stage, the trash can where Chantel had thrown my gift. I reached in. My hands got sticky with frosting and spilled champagne. I felt around until I found it. The wooden box. It was cracked. I opened it. The Meissen shepherdess was inside, shattered into jagged shards. The head was broken off. The gold leaf was scraped. I picked up the biggest piece. I held it up. I walked back to my parents, who were now being led away by the police. "Stop," I said to the officers. "Just for a second." They paused. My mother looked at me with hope. She thought I was going to save her. I held up the broken porcelain. "You asked for help," I said. "Here." I dropped the shards into her handcuffed hands. She fumbled them, trying to hold them. "This statue was worth $50,000, I said. "I restored it for you. It was perfect. And you threw it in the trash because you thought it was cheap." I looked her in the eye. "You threw away a fortune, Mom," I said. "You threw away me. And now you have exactly what you valued. Nothing." I turned my back on them. I walked to Dante. He wrapped his arm around my waist. We walked out of the tent. We walked past the valet stand. We walked to the truck. The rain had stopped. The air was cool and clean. The moon was breaking through the clouds. Dante opened the door for me. I climbed into the cab. The leather seats smelled like home. They smelled like him. He got in the driver's side. He started the engine. The V8 rumbled a deep, comforting purr. I rolled down the window. My mother was being loaded into the back of a police car. She was looking at me. She was crying. I reached into my purse. I pulled out the cocktail napkin I had used to wipe the rain from my face earlier, the napkin she had refused to give me. I threw it out the window. It fluttered through the air and landed in the mud near her feet. "Lau nuk matdi," I said softly, though she couldn't hear me. "Don't ruin the makeup. You have a mugshot to take." Dante put the truck in gear. We rolled down the driveway. We drove past the iron gates. We drove past the sign that said Oakwood Estate. I leaned my head back against the seat. I closed my eyes. "Where to?" Dante asked. "Anywhere," I said. "Just drive." He took my hand, and we drove into the darkness, leaving the lights, the noise, and the ruin far behind us. The road was open, and for the first time in my life, I was not sitting on the sidelines. I was in the driver's seat. This story teaches us that true power does not need to scream to be heard. Zora's family was so obsessed with the illusion of wealth that they missed the reality of character standing right in front of them. They mistook Dante's humble silence for weakness and Zora's patience for defeat, proving that arrogance is the quickest path to ruin. Never judge someone by their clothes or their job title, because the person you treat like dirt today might be the one signing your termination letter tomorrow. Dignity is the only luxury that truly matters, and unlike a leased Porsche, it cannot be repossessed. If you have ever had to build your own table because your family wouldn't give you a seat, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice served ice cold.